Hello and welcome to the Followell Company's Ignite Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, founder, and CEO, Rob Followell. Our special guest today is Dr. Jerel Brandt. Dr. Brandt is a board-certified general surgeon with over a decade of experience in acute care, trauma, and advanced surgical techniques. Currently providing surgical services across multiple healthcare systems, he has held leadership roles including interim trauma medical director and chair of the Division of Surgery at Trinity Health. Dr. Brandt's dedication to quality improvement, patient care, and mentoring healthcare professionals reflects his passion for advancing surgical excellence. In addition to his surgical expertise, he is deeply committed to helping physicians avoid burnout, advocating for better balance and support in the face of growing administrative and clinical demands. Let's welcome to the podcast, Dr. Jerel Brandt. Well, Dr. Brandt, welcome. So glad to have you. You know, in the intro, I gave a little bit about your background from your bio. Tell me a little bit more about you from a personal perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you. I'm really excited about this. So I've been married for 20 years. I have 3 children who are now all teenagers and enjoying that time and that season of life. But probably if we were to backpedal a ways back, I kind of started off with an interest in exercise and fitness, and that led me to get my bachelor's of science in athletic training. My interest in that led me to getting a master's of exercise physiology, and then I went on to medical school and then eventually to residency for general surgery. After getting out of residency, my wife and I decided we want to move back to our home state, be near family, so that we could kind of start to invest in them again. And that led me to work at just my local hospital where I was at for probably 10 years or so. After being there for probably 5 years, I began to get involved in various leadership positions, starting off with working with our office staff and then working with my fellow partners in the general surgery group, and then eventually working on several committees throughout the institution, which led me the opportunity to become the trauma director at my facility for a while. So that was all great experience and I enjoyed it, but working full-time as a general surgeon on top of taking trauma and general surgery call, on top of then branching out into these leadership opportunities, I became very burnt out, which unfortunately led me to have to step away from working at that hospital completely in order to kind of get a handle on my time again and reprioritize some of the areas of my life.
But you talk a lot about leadership. Tell me, how did you develop your leadership skills along the way while you were working at your healthcare institution?
Yeah, so after probably working there for about 5 years, I was invited to attend the Global Leadership Summit, which is a 2-day summit that's televised around the world. And going into that, I didn't know what leadership was. I thought it was kind of the same thing as administration and management. But walking out of that, I realized that leadership is much different than that. And actually, leadership is simply put, it's just influence. And so I began to look for ways that I could influence those around me. And even though I didn't have an official title at the time, I was looking for ways that I could probably make the situation around me better for those people that I worked with. And one of the clear areas that I saw initially was just our office staff. We had a lot of turnover in our office staff. We had poor communication amongst the office staff, and this led to conflicts. And so we started holding monthly meetings just to open up lines of communication for them. That led eventually to doing team building sessions where we looked at personality profiles and ways that we can work with different types of personality profiles. From there, I started branching out and working with my fellow partners. We started meeting monthly and looking for ways that we could kind of unify our practices rather than functioning as 4 or 5 independent surgeons all working for the same entity. We tried to function as 4 or 5 surgeons unified and being on the same page, which ultimately helped out the institution and the office because we all did things the same, which was really nice. As different positions throughout the organization opened up, I think that leadership saw that we were making some good progress and appreciated what I was working on with my team. And so they offered me opportunities to be involved in different committees throughout the organization. Then at that point, which, as I mentioned, then led to me being able to serve as trauma director for a year before I left the hospital.
Fantastic. You mentioned you talked about influence, that leadership is influence. Um, John Maxwell always says, and he's one of the published more books on leadership, I think, than anybody else. He always
Mm-hmm.
says that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And that is so, so true. You know, all of us from time to time, we feel like, there are areas in our life we excel in or that maybe we're weaker in. What are some of those areas that you really feel like you've excelled throughout your career and in life in general?
Yeah, I think that looking back over the big picture, one of the things that has served me very well is just being a lifelong learner. As I said, I started off with just a basic interest in exercise and fitness, and then that grew into athletic training, which grew into an interest in exercise physiology, which then blossomed into physiology, and then medical school, and then surgical training. So I think just my enjoyment of learning, and then once I got out into practice, I kind of initially thought like, oh, I made it. I put in all my time, did all my schooling, and now I've done it, and I'm just gonna take care of patients and then retire or something. And again, kind of that 3, 4, 5, 6 year range of my career, I started to kind of feel unsettled and just kind of thought, man, is this all there is? Because I wanted to continue that learning process. And so once I started getting into the leadership realm, I was just very excited about another opportunity to learn something that could take me to some new areas. And backing away from that hospital was hard and scary. It's all I had really known for 10 years. But doing that has allowed me to step into a new realm as well of entrepreneurship. I've started my own kind of local locums business where I go to surrounding rural hospitals throughout my state, offer surgical options for them. And so that's an exciting new area for me to learn about. And then hopefully an area that I can expand my influence to and influence not just the people in the walls of the hospital at my local town, but maybe the people in my state as well, and maybe further.
Fantastic. Well, it's such a need out there right now. And you said that over that 10-year period, well, throughout that 10-year period, and not throughout, but part of that 10-year period, you dealt with COVID. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and what a change that COVID had on the healthcare industry, actually the industry, all industries as a whole, our country and the world as a whole. Uh, what do you see some of those changes in healthcare over the next 10 years? When you look out, where are we going to be in 10 years?
Yeah, and you're right. COVID did have such an impact on the healthcare industry, and I think it stressed out leaders in ways that they didn't think was imaginable. One of the areas that I found a unique opportunity to just try to support some of the people that work on the front lines during that time is there's a few times when I just was a sitter. Sometimes hospital patients need someone just to sit in their room with them, and everyone was afraid to go into the hospital. So I volunteered to be a sitter a few times, and the nursing assistants, the therapists that walked into the room and saw me sitting there first was very taken aback. They're like, why is Dr. Brandt in the room? I'm like, I'm just as a sitter here. And I think that gave them confidence and made them feel appreciated, made the nurses feel appreciated. And just a little thing like that, maybe an hour a week or whatever they needed me, made a huge impact. So that was just kind of a fun little thing that didn't take a lot of effort on my time, but made a big impact on those people around me. But moving forward, we had prior to COVID a shortage of providers in the healthcare industry here in the United States. And after COVID, we had a shortage of healthcare people across the entire board, from techs to nurses to providers. And so I don't think that's going to necessarily get any better moving forward. And so I think there's a couple things that you're going to see You're going to see a lot more advanced practice providers coming into the workforce and being trained to work up. And so they're going to be taking some of the workload off of the MDs and DOs. But you're also going to see, and we already have seen, the continued incorporation of AI into the healthcare industry at all levels. I think the most direct way that patients will notice it is they might start to interact with artificial intelligence before they go to the walk-in clinic or the ER for something. They might get screened out by AI. But on the back end, the healthcare providers will be using it to help automate their charting process, doing their patient dictations, potentially in the billing realm. We see different forms of AI in even the surgical theater. One of the things I've enjoyed doing is robotic surgery, and people often ask me, they're like, does the robot do the surgery or do you do the surgery? I'm like, no, I still do the surgery, but the increased use of technology allowing us to do more precise surgeries, which results in better patient outcomes, better return to activities of daily living. We'll be seeing all that continue to grow in all areas of healthcare, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You, you mentioned several things. Your company, you also talked about AI and the things that you're doing. What are some of the ways that you personally, as a surgeon, as an individual, and your company or companies, what are some of the things that you're doing to add value that are really going to put you and also those around you in a great position in the next 10 years?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the things, as I'm still kind of in the infancy of developing my company, is I'm building relationships with these rural hospitals and the critical access hospitals. And beyond that, then I start to look for ways that I can maybe help meet their needs. And one of the things that I've been seeing a lot is they don't necessarily have the volume or maybe even the finances to have a full-time surgeon, but they can have somebody come out a couple times a month and serve their patients. It's not uncommon in my state for patients to drive 1, 2, 3 hours to get to their doctor's appointment. And so if I can go to them and them drive 10, 20 minutes to see me, and then I can see a bunch of people at once, that's great. The downside of that is then if I only show up once or twice a month, it could be months before we get them to surgery. And so one of the things I'm hoping to continue to develop is kind of strengthen some relationships between myself and the current providers they have at these facilities. If I can work with the primary care physicians and do some education with them on the nuances of how I line my patients up for surgery, the things I look for, I think that we could streamline that process a little bit. I've noticed that there's a lot of advanced practice providers working at these facilities, and they don't necessarily always have the breadth or depth of surgical information in their training. So if I can teach them some of these things, and then if I can streamline the process to get these patients to surgery sooner, I think that would be better for the facility and better for the patient. And then on the back end, if I'm not going to be immediately available in the area, I need to be working with these primary care providers who are on the front lines of that post-operative patient care then to kind of be able to field some of those questions and have ways for them to get a hold of me if they have any questions. And so we're trying to come up with some creative and unique opportunities that we can streamline patient care in an efficient manner without decreasing the quality of patient care.
I'm a huge advocate for rural healthcare, so thank you for what you're doing. And I don't think most people understand the true impact that rural healthcare has. When you lose a hospital, it's very
Mhm.
difficult to recruit any additional industry to that community if there's not a hospital. And then it's not just about the patient and where they go, but it's the impact on the entire family, the disruption
Mhm.
in the family, and then not being able as the family to be there and support the patient. So much of our healthcare and our recovery is dependent upon being surrounded by people that we trust and we love. And so thank you for what you're doing. It's greatly needed.
Yeah, thank you. And you're absolutely right. It's kind of this holistic approach to healthcare. And I mean, it's not uncommon for us to talk about, oh, maybe we should transfer this patient to a high level of care. And either the patient doesn't want to go because their family can't go with them, or the family's like, we just can't afford this. And then our loved one is way out there by themselves. And so that's a big factor on patients' decisions. And then I think beyond that, when you lose one of those smaller hospitals, all of those patients then get funneled to the next hospital size up, which is probably already understaffed and overburdened as well. And it's just a domino effect because all those people have to go somewhere. And so eventually they'll land at a different hospital, and it'll be all the same problems, just in a different location.
For sure. All right. Well, I've got a leadership question that I often ask my guests, and
Okay.
yeah, can be a zinger sometimes. Sometimes, oftentimes, if you're looking at me, sometimes we don't live up to either our own expectations or we don't live up to the expectations of others. Can you think about, talk about a time where you didn't live up to either your own expectations or those of others, and how you recover from that, what you learned from that, how you grew from that?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was working at my local hospital, one of the committees I had the opportunity to serve on was the quality committee. And that kind of does a range of different things, but sometimes on occasion we'd see issues with providers come up where maybe they didn't get the patient satisfaction score they'd wanted, or maybe they were written up for a particular reason or another. And as you're kind of diving into the case, knowing and working with those providers, it was pretty clear to me that they were kind of strung out. They were overworked. They were pushed to their limits over and over and over again, and that's what resulted in this situation. And it was always a little bit hard to fault the provider, and even though there's never an excuse for your behavior, like that's always your choice. But on the flip side, it's if you can see that the system is not supporting them, it's hard to completely blame them as well. And after seeing that for a while, and then in my own life starting to take on more leadership opportunities, I slowly began to notice that in myself. And I was starting to become the provider that was having interactions with people that maybe weren't my best moments. And I was having a difficult time recovering from some of the stresses of being on call, and I was low on reserves and I wasn't able to replenish them. And I just got to a point where I just couldn't give it my all anymore, and I wasn't putting my best forward. And so, unfortunately, I probably realized that too late, and that's kind of one of the main reasons I stepped away from the hospital that I was working at. But one of the things that probably also kept me in the game for as long as it did was I developed lots of outlets for my stress, and I began to learn the importance of physical activity and stress reduction, and finding a few of those hobbies that kind of help center you, finding more time to spend with my family that I had probably kind of neglected for the past 10 to 15 years or more while I was going through all of my training and all of the professional work I was doing. So I began to learn that these are great outlets for me personally. So looking back, as I learned those, it helped kind of temporize and slow down my burnout. But I still was having a hard time managing my time. And I just kept taking on more and more and more and more until eventually I just had to do a hard stop and quit everything.
One of the things that in coaching, I often share with my coaching clients is that creating your own resilience toolbox. So
Mhm.
before you need it, so that in the moment, you know that you can go to that toolbox and all those things that you talked about, you know are there. And so you don't have to, you don't have to second guess. You don't have to wonder. You can open that up and play the music that you love that will calm you or help you think about the going to the location, or maybe it's
Mhm.
fly fishing or whatever it is for each individual. But building that toolbox is so important. So again,
Right.
learning those lessons the hard way. Thank you for sharing those lessons with other physicians, because I hear it all the time as a former CEO and working around physicians almost every day. Burnout is a
Mhm.
real issue for so many people. So thanks for your work
Right.
in that.
Yeah.
What are some of the leadership principles that you have found important over your career?
I think there's a couple of things that I probably am a little bit more passionate about. And one of the main things is words matter. There's that old adage that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I understand there's some truth to that. But I think when it comes to leadership, what you say and how you say really matters. And sometimes a backhanded compliment can be worse than constructive criticism, right?
Mhm.
So, how you say something to the people around you, if they misinterpret it or if you say it without true meaning, I think that can be very hurtful, and that hurts the culture um, and that you're trying to develop. And so, right along with that, then, is I believe very strongly in trying to lift others up, kind of take those people around you and just look for opportunities to instill a bit of positivity in their day. You never know what they're going through. And so, again, it doesn't have to be any major act. It might just be a few words of encouragement, a smile, some patience, some grace. Sometimes that's all it takes to improve somebody else's day. So, words matter, build others up. And in fact, that's one of our family values, Brandt, build others up, right? We want to display that as a form of leadership in our family and then our kids. I'm also a firm believer in improving employee satisfaction by building relationships. I think that if you have a relationship with the person you're working with or communicating with, you're much more likely to give them the grace that everybody needs on occasion and believe the best out of them. And I think that you could probably have a relatively mundane job, but if you love the people you work with, that will be a potentially a lifelong job. Sometimes it doesn't matter the actual work you're doing; it matters more the people you're doing it with. And so you could have a great job, but if you don't like the people you're working with, it's just not going to be a long-standing position. So, uh, and
Couldn't
then yeah, so I think those are probably just three areas that I'm especially passionate about when it comes to leadership.
What are some of the things over this last year, some of those leadership lessons that you've learned just over the last 12 months?
Um, I should have learned this a long time ago because there's that saying that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I always said that, but it just became really poignant for me, I think, over the past 12 months. And I think you can't force people to follow you, but if you're moving in the right direction, they will follow you willingly. And so I am trying to find ways to tell people less and show people more, lead by example. And then again, if they believe in what I'm doing, then they'll follow me. And I think with that, I think people intuitively want to follow a good leader. Um, I just think that a bad leader will turn a good job into a bad job, right? And so if you are going in the right direction and you treat people with respect and dignity, and you just treat them appropriately, that they're going to want to follow you in the direction you're going.
Couldn't agree more. Well, let me ask you this. What do you see looking into the future? What's the next chapter of your life going to look like? You got a lot of things going on.
I do, yeah, and it's super exciting. Right now, I'm still just very much into trying to develop my business and develop relationships with hospitals around my state. and see how I can invest in those hospitals. Beyond that, as I said, I'd like to, try to use that as a springboard to have influence not just around the state, but maybe beyond, and developing my business into more than just patient care. And I guess is what I mean by that is it occurred to me several years ago that when I do surgery on somebody, I can improve their life. And so maybe I can do 5 surgeries a day or 6 or 7 surgeries a day, but you're really limited by your time. But on the flip side, if I can invest in 5 people a day and make their day better, and then they go out and invest in 5 people themselves, now all of a sudden, I've not just changed 5 lives, I've changed 25 lives. And so I love the idea of trying to improve surroundings by using my leadership influence, as opposed to just doing it from a surgical standpoint. So that'll be kind of an area that I'm hoping to develop into with my business. And then lastly, I had the opportunity to participate in a medical mission trip when I was in residency out in Africa, and it was life changing and amazing. And so I definitely would like to get back into medical missions, when possible, and get some new experiences that way as well.
What are some of those leadership areas or things that you're focused on right now or that really interest you?
I think team building. One of the things that I find that just really kind of energizes me and excites me is being involved in team building. So if I can feel like I make a connection with people and we've all come to unity on a decision and able to move forward to build something, I think that's just really exciting. So I love being involved with team building. And then, as we talked a little bit about burnout, this is clearly something that is intimate to me in my experience in the past. So helping people prevent burnout through some of those areas that we talked about already. So I hope to try to use my influence to help others prevent burnout before they get there, and then look for healthy ways to deal with burnout, because there are so many unhealthy ways as well to manage that.
Tying everything together, any closing thoughts for today?
I think that we've talked a lot about leadership, which is something I love to talk about and could probably talk all day about it. But just going back, back when I first started out in practice, I didn't understand the difference between leadership and management. I just thought it was all the same. And I've been reading this great book by Pete Oakes called The High Impact Leader, and he talks about the difference between leadership and management. He says you lead people, but you manage systems. So you should never be managing people. You should be managing systems that will then empower the people you lead to excel at their jobs. And so I think that's just maybe a great distinction to leave our audience with today.
Daniel Pink, who's one of my favorite authors, talks about the difference between leadership and management. He said management is a technology. It's a technology that was created during the Industrial Revolution, and it's geared towards compliance. You think about an assembly line and compliance to that assembly line and doing it the same way. And he said, think back to the technology that we had in the Industrial Revolution. How much of the other technology are we using today? Not much. And so, just like you're saying, it needs to be leadership and autonomy and developing people, helping them to think for themselves, not just managing to an assembly line. Not that there's not a place for that, but in general, as our culture and as industry changes, then certainly we're looking for people to be forward thinking. So, couldn't agree
I
more.
love that. Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Well, if people want to learn more about you and some of the things that you're doing, how can they connect with you and reach out to you?
Right now, probably the best way is on LinkedIn. I do have a profile on there. My email address is drjjbrandt, BRANDT @gmail. I'm working on getting a website set up, so that is coming, and I'm excited about that. But in the meantime, LinkedIn is probably the easiest.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Brandt, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. I know that our audience is going to be impacted by your words today. They can see and feel the passion that you have for helping others. And from somebody who spent much of his career in rural healthcare, I just want to thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.